What's happening, guys? So we are going to go through this Bonneville T120. We're going to inventory the modifications that we've knocked out so far, and then I'll give you my riding impressions, let you know what I think about how this bike is now versus when it was stock. So kicking it off from the front, yes, the fly screen. Got the bar end mirrors. Right off the bat, you may not have noticed, but it does have the slotted side covers, and in there we have removed the snorkel and the grommet. She's got a Tune ECU tune, and then a British Customs X-Pipe decat. So what's it like to ride now with all of this? Well, let's get into that. All right, guys, so let's talk about this Bonneville T120. I want to inventory some of the modifications that we have made, and then we can have a chat about the riding impressions about how it rode stock versus how it gets down the road now. So, starting at the front, fly screen, bar end mirrors. Give you guys a quick look at that British Customs decat X-Pipe. Sounds absolutely amazing through the stock silencers. Absolutely love the way this bike sounds. We've got the slotted side covers with the mesh there. We've got no snorkel and no grommet and a Tune ECU. Of course, rocking that tail tidy. That's how she looks, but what's she like to ride? Well, let's get into that. So this motorcycle is quite a bit of a different animal than what she was stock. And although I haven't ever put this bike on a dyno, the butt dyno, I can tell you, is rather impressed with how this thing gets down the road now. When it was stock, the bike basically had a bit of a, well, let's just call it an aerodynamically limited speed on the highway. 100 miles an hour was a real accomplishment for this thing, and even after the fly screen went on this bike, it wouldn't necessarily struggle to get you to the triple digits, but you definitely know that there was some work being put into play. Add into that the Tune, the off-road or decat X-Pipe, and the snorkel removal, the grommet removal, and the side covers with the vents to allow fresh air to get in there a little bit more easily. It really did take the entire orchestra of those modifications to be playing in concert to get the bike where it is now. But I'm happy to report that, well, let's just say that 100 mile per hour mark is rather effortless now. Matter of fact, that proverbial brick wall that these types of motorcycles will hit doesn't happen really until you start diving deeper into the triple digits, say 110 plus. Now, the bike's never been on a dyno, so I can't tell you what kind of gain that it's had, but I can tell you how it feels to ride on the street and when the bike starts to lay over as it did before versus how it does now. Seems to have added about 10 or 12% to the speed that it'll get to before you can start to really feel the bike working underneath you. So that's a pretty big feat. The bike makes power now somewhere between a stock T120 and a speed twin. It's got a significantly better torque pull at 35 to 42 to 4,500 RPM. And really it's that 4,500 RPM pull that it's significantly improved upon. It did not have that before, and it definitely has that now. It'll pull much more cleanly to 55 or 6,000 RPM, but it's really how the bike cruises down the highway that makes the biggest difference. Whereas before, a cruising speed of say 75 or 80, especially if you're dealing with a headwind, seemed to be about the functional limit of the bike. Not saying it couldn't go faster, of course it could, but just the effort that it seemed to have needed to get there was much more greater than it is now. Matter of fact, no matter what the wind condition seems to be, the happy cruising speed seems to fall into that 85 to 95 mile per hour range with plenty on reserve to blast you past that 100 mile per hour mark. And it's really not until you start getting over about 105 or so that aerodynamic brick wall starts to really take place. And of course, I'm not ducking in. I'm just kind of holding on to this thing to try to keep some consistency here and to be able to at least be able to read the gauges as well to give myself an idea for where we're at. But the bottom line is this. With everything that's been done to this motorcycle, it is absolutely a peach to ride. And for me, if I am looking to just go for a ride on a motorcycle, I'm not trying to be on a cruiser, so to speak. The sport bike just isn't in my mood at that time. I grab the keys to this Bonneville. There's nothing more, it puts me in a good mood type of a scenario than me being on this bike just to ride a bike. And I think that this is where a lot of times guys get too wrapped up in the specifications of a motorcycle. Although I will say that with now more than 80 foot-pounds of torque and more than 80 horsepower to play with, this bike has plenty of grunt to put a smile on anybody's face. But it's just the way that it puts the power to the ground now. It is so much fun to just row through the gears, to listen to that intake growl, to listen to the exhaust. There's so much theater going on now with this motorcycle that it just did not have before. So it adds to the overall riding experience. So to recap, we've got more power on tap pretty much everywhere. And by the way, if it did lose anything with the freer flowing exhaust, it maybe lost a little bit down low somewhere, but you'd never know it because you don't cruise on the highway as low as the RPM would be that this bike could have maybe lost a step. I don't know. I haven't noticed it, but I've got to have some kind of a caveat in there somewhere, I suppose. But really, truth be told, it doesn't feel like it lost a step anywhere. Just got back from a ride on this thing, as a matter of fact, and I can tell you that I'm still smiling from ear to ear just because of how much fun it is. Again, you've got more power on tap, but the theater of the thing now is so much there. It's just so much more there than what it was before. So would I recommend these modifications? You're darn right I would. So the fly screen I would recommend just because if you ever plan on riding one of these types of bikes more than 75 or 80 miles per hour, you're going to want a fly screen. And the way that that thing breaks up the air around you makes riding extremely nice. You don't get hit with the full wind blast. And if you're going into a headwind, well, it makes riding it a lot more comfortable. Certainly a lot less effort. The bar end mirrors, I consider to be a safety thing for these types of bikes. Stocked mirrors, only thing I ever get a good look at is my elbows. With these bar end mirrors, I can see far better behind me and to the sides and in my blind spot. They look far and away better. I mean, I don't know if you can get a good shot of that, but my goodness, it is a much more handsome profile than it is with stock mirrors. But it's the safety thing that really gets me. And the side benefit is it reduces the amount of buffeting, that wind buffeting that those side mirrors can get, which is kind of right here in your ears, so to speak. The mirrors being further out, it's not as buffeted. So it's a cleaner riding experience. Of course, the tail tidy, because tail tidy, it looks tough. But the tune, the exhaust, the snorkel removal, all of that, the power aspect, again, adding to the theater of the bike, plus the power, of course, I gotta say, it is a grand slam home run for this particular motorcycle. So if you've got one of these, consider those modifications. I couldn't imagine this bike now without them, and that's pretty high praise. And I'll go even a bit further and say this. The way that this bike looks, the way that this bike gets down the road, and the way that it feels just rolling through the gears, I would take this over a Speed Twin any day of the week. And guys, with that, I'm gonna wrap it up. Post up your comments. Let me know what you're up to with your Bonnevilles, and I'll catch y'all on the next one. That's a wrap.